Public Protector Adv Busisiwe Mkhwebane has cleared former Northwest Premier Supra Mahumapelo of any wrongdoing. The investigation came at the back of a complaint by the former EFF Secretary-General Gordrich Gardee. This followed an article claiming a herd of cattle costing about 1.5 million rand meant for emerging farmers was instead delivered to Nkandla as a gift to former President Jacob Zuma. Mkhwebane also cleared Public Enterprises Minister Pravin and the Eskom Board over a complaint against COO Jan Oberholzer. Adv Mkwebane joins us live now to speak to us about some of these reports. Adv Mkwebane, good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Good evening, Bongiwe. Good evening to the viewers and listeners.
Thank you. Let's start then with the investigation into the cattle in the Northwest. Let's talk about your approach when this investigation was then placed at your table. Let's talk about the approach then that your office implemented here.
The complaint was lodged by the EFF former Secretary-General Mr. Gardee in terms of the Executive Members Ethics Act. And as you would know, that it's only members of Parliament who can lodge that particular complaint. It was alleging that Mr. Mahumapelo was involved or facilitated the delivery of these Bonsmara cattle to the former President Zuma. So the complaint then, when we receive such complaints, we should finalize them within 30 days. Unfortunately, we couldn't, and normally the Act is very clear that we should inform the President that we would not be able to finalize the complaint within 30 days. And that also needed us to investigate in details, because when the complaint is lodged, we will have then to acquire all the evidence relating to this particular matter, hence the delay it took for us to finalize this matter. So we had to interview all the involved parties. We had to independently source our own evidence, especially in the form of checking the relevant documents within the departments and the expenditures relating to this particular project, so that we can trace and track whether there's any money which was from these fiscals which then bought the alleged cattle. So that's what we did. And then our investigation revealed that indeed, that was not substantiated, and hence the finding that there is no evidence to that effect.
When I read your full report, it also looks like there may have been some challenges here and there when it comes to getting some of the information to be forthcoming. I mean, you look at, one Mr. Muntswe, who is quite critical here and was not able to substantiate, some of what he was telling the Public Protector's Office. And that also goes to some of the cell phone records themselves. I wonder then how much of the evidence you had at your disposal then made the Office of the Public Protector to say that here there is definitely no wrongdoing, because when I read the report, I still have some questions.
I think the question you should be, or some information which you should have, is that the investigation was focusing on the Executive Members Ethics Act and the involvement of the former Premier. And the information we got from this Mr. Muntswe, whose affidavit then said he paid from his personal account, which later with our investigation, we could trace that indeed, in fact, it was not paid from his personal account, but was from the account of AgriDelight. Further, I said it in the report that there are then the issues of a DPCI and Asset Forfeiture Unit, who met with the team of Public Protector, the investigators, and indeed they are looking into the criminal conduct, if any, which has been committed by the parties, which does not fall within the mandate of the Public Protector. So that information is with the DPCI. We were focusing on EMIA, that behavior, whether indeed the resources of the state were paid from the fiscus into the buying or procurement of those cows which are mentioned in this report.
So if I hear you correctly, then Advocate Mkwebane, you are saying that because the AFU is also combing through these financial statements, as well as some of the criminal investigations that could potentially be underway, is that we may see a different conclusion by these bodies. Am I understanding correctly?
Especially if there is any crime which has been committed, and that crime falls within the definition of corruption as defined under POCA and PRECA. So that indeed will be dealt with. But as far as the Executive Members Ethics Act is concerned, the involvement of facilitation, we don't have that evidence in our possession. Unfortunately, yes, the issue of delaying or not acquiring the communication, because if that information the law enforcement were having, they would have shared with our investigators, because we do cooperate in the investigations. Unless then they never shared, because when we subpoena the information ourselves, then there was that indication that the records of any telephone communication and any evidence which we could then say indeed there was then that communication between this person and this person, and the person's details or the person was based at this particular location. Unfortunately, that information we couldn't acquire.
So, Advocate Mkwebane, one of the things that I'd really like to canvass with you tonight is that in your report, you mentioned this Agri-Delight former representative that is saying that, he was being threatened, he was receiving threats from unknown people. Did your office establish where these were coming from, and why was he being threatened?
We didn't do that. That doesn't fall within our mandate. That falls within the mandate of law enforcement. And especially if the law enforcement would want to utilize him as the witness, they do have measures to put in place to protect witnesses if he is a witness, or alternatively, they've got ways of making sure that even if he's not into the witness protection, how is he protected, so that if indeed is threatened by people who might have benefited from this unlawfully, then they would be able to make sure that they protect him. I don't know on that one. Yes, he told us, but that is also very critical for the law enforcement to protect him.
Advocate Mkwebane, as a final question then on this subject matter before we move into the IPP hearings, because we don't have a lot of time. Yesterday when, after you released your reports and reports started coming out from different media houses, I couldn't help but look at some of the reaction on social media, and they were saying that they're not surprised that you would find in favor of the former Northwest Premier. Some are even saying that it's because you are aligned with the RT faction. It's not a new allegation that you are facing. I'm sure it's been coming over and over again, and you've been seeing it in the public domain. Where do you think this emanates from, and what's your reaction then to those that are saying, in fact, you finding in favor of the former Northwest Premier is aligned to what they were expecting because you may be aligned to that faction of the ANC?
Bongiwe, that one is their own issue. And unfortunately, to show that we do our work without fear or favor, they must also then ask why we didn't have any finding against the Minister Gordhan. Because when we do our work, we don't even check who is the target or who is involved. We don't play the man, we play the ball. Our focus was who is involved. And for those people, again, which is disappointing, and as well yourself to ask that question, is that we have investigators. I'm not at all involved in the investigation. Investigators source all this information, and when they compile the reports, we focus on what prescripts have been violated and the evidence to substantiate that. That's all what we do always. Therefore, I wouldn't comment about that. It's people's views, and I think it's so backward. And so it's not taking us anywhere as a country if people are going to be focusing on those. Let's focus on dealing with what the laws of the country are saying. And if any person is accused, and as an investigative body, we uncover that there is evidence, and the evidence says the person is implicated, that will be the situation. I don't think I would have to maybe continue explaining myself, Bongile. I don't think it's even taking us anywhere as a country. I mean, we should be focusing on making sure that everyone is protected under this constitution of the country.
And Advocate Mkwebane, before we wrap up, there's another, there's hearings that your office is also undertaking, and this is into the renewable energy program. And there's been a lot of talk outside of even your office. There's been a lot of reaction to, this particular story in the country. And I see that there's also hearings here. And I wonder then if you are making some headway when it comes to really getting to the nub of the issues there, because we see some reports and also listening to some of the officials from the energy department, they're saying, no, it looks like you're looking to find fault. But at the same time, this is an important conversation around renewable energy that must be had.
Definitely. I think, again, if there are allegations which are made out there, and it's so concerning as well, finding people like your so-called energy expert, Zabo Anton Eberhard, well, we've corrected him, that if we receive a complaint, we then conduct a preliminary investigation. And if we find that indeed the matter should be investigated, we get all the evidence, we go ahead and investigate the matter. And we even told the various officials and the minister not to say we've got any conclusion, you are assisting us. I don't know, again, how should we explain ourselves as an institution. Once we receive the complaint, we should put the allegations to the state institution. They assist us with all the evidence and the information. We then test that evidence and information, whether it complies to the relevant prescripts and whether there's any prejudice suffered by any person. If the information is not the evidence, actually not even the information, is not substantiating the allegation, then we will close the matter like the matters we've closed, that there is no substantiation, and close the matter. And if we find that there are observations which we would want to bring to the attention of the state institution to improve and deal with so that the recurrence is not happening, we also then advise accordingly. It's so concerning as well to see that the complainant now is being painted as if is this kind of a person. But again, even if the complainant can withdraw, the unfortunate part is that there is also the other whistleblower. But as an institution, we are here to assist and support government. If everything is according to plan, definitely we would make sure that we put this matter to rest. We don't have any preconceived ideas. And this hearing as well was promoting transparency so that people can also hear themselves what happened, what transpired, and what is the correct narrative in the matter, which will assist us when we at the end issue the report, which will be detailed. It will also then give direction why we've taken a certain decision.
Advocate Mkwebane, it's always a pleasure to speak to you, and I hope that when that report is released, we can then get to talk more about it, because this conversation around renewable energy is one that is not going to go away, as you say, and it's a conversation that is important. Thank you so much for your time this evening. That was Public Protector Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane.